The Sundown Showdown. The sun beat down upon the dusty town of Redemption, its inhabitants scurrying for shade like ants from a threatened anthill. Jet Blackjack McCoy, a gunslinger with a reputation for being the fastest draw in the West, rode into town on a black stallion, his eyes scanning the main street for any sign of trouble. Trouble was exactly what he found. Benedict the Butcher Brown, a ruthless outlaw with a penchant for brutality, stood tall in the center of the street, his gang of rough riders forming a semicircle around him. Their leader, a cold, calculating man with a scar above his left eyebrow, sneered at the townsfolk, his hand resting on the butt of his gun. "You're all a bunch of cowards," Benedict spat, his voice like a rusty gate. "You're too afraid to stand up to me and my boys. But I'm here to tell you that's all about to change." Rosie the Raven Reynolds, a skilled pilot with a penchant for flying by the seat of her pants, swooped in on her trusty biplane, the Black Swan. She landed with a thud, her engine sputtering, and hopped out, her eyes locked on the standoff. "Looks like things are about to get interesting," she said, her voice husky from years of smoking cigarettes. Chub the Kid Kennedy, a young, scrappy urchin with a talent for getting out of tight spots, peeked out from behind a nearby water trough, his eyes wide with excitement. "What's the plan, Jet?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the rumble of the engines. Jet reined in his horse, his eyes never leaving Benedict's face. "We're gonna take him down, Chub. You ready?" The kid nodded, a grin spreading across his freckled face. Benedict sneered at the unlikely duo. "You think you can take me down? I've got the best gang in the West, and I've got the fastest draw. You're just a couple of fools playing at heroism." Jet smiled, a cold, calculated smile. "I've got a reputation for being the fastest draw in the West, Benedict. And I'm here to tell you, I'm not going to let you take over this town without a fight." The air was thick with tension as the two groups faced off. Rosie, ever the pragmatist, surveyed the situation, her mind working overtime to think of a plan. "You know, Benedict," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm, "I think you're underestimating us. Jet here is a one-man army, and Chub's got the heart of a lion. And I've got this." She patted the Black Swan's engine, which roared to life, sending a shower of sparks into the air. "You see, Benedict, we're not just a couple of cowpokes with 6 shooters. We're a team. And when we work together, we're unstoppable." Benedict snarled, his face reddening with rage. "You think you're some kind of heroes, don't you? Well, I'm here to tell you, you're just a couple of relics of the past. We're the future, and you're just irrelevant." The air was electric with tension as the two groups faced off. Jet, ever the pragmatist, knew that Benedict was bluffing, but he also knew that the outlaw had a reputation for being unpredictable. "You're making a big mistake, Benedict," Jet said, his voice low and deadly. "I'm giving you one chance to back down. If you don't, I'll make sure you never ride again." Benedict's face twisted with rage, and for a moment, it seemed like he might actually take Jet up on his offer. But then, a cold, calculating glint appeared in his eye, and he nodded, a slow, cruel smile spreading across his face. "You're on," he said, his voice dripping with malice. The air was thick with tension as the two groups faced off. Rosie, ever the pragmatist, knew that the time for talk was over. "Time to get down to business," she said, her voice husky with excitement. With a nod, Jet drew his gun, the sun glinting off the metal. Chub, ever the kid, grinned, his eyes shining with excitement. "Let's do this," he said, drawing his own 6-shooter. Benedict, ever the outlaw, laughed, his gun flashing in the sunlight. The battle was on. The shootout. The air was thick with the smell of gunpowder as the two groups faced off. Jet and Benedict drew, their guns flashing in the sunlight. Chub, ever the kid, held his own, his 6-shooter firing in rapid succession. Rosie, ever the pragmatist, swooped down from the skies, her biplane's machine guns blazing. The Black Swan's engines roared, sending a wave of air crashing into the outlaws. Benedict's gang was caught off guard, their guns stuttering in response. Jet took advantage of the confusion, his guns blazing as he moved down the street. Chub, ever the kid, took down 2 outlaws with precision shots, his 6-shooter firing with deadly accuracy. Rosie's biplane swooped and dived, its machine guns cutting down the outlaws like wheat. Benedict himself was caught off guard, his gun firing wildly as he stumbled backward. Jet took advantage of the momentary confusion, his gun flashing in the sunlight. The outlaw leader stumbled, his eyes wide with surprise, as Jet's bullet struck him in the chest. Benedict crumpled, his gang scattering as their leader fell. The battle was over. The outlaws were defeated. Jet, Chub, and Rosie stood victorious, their guns still smoking. The sun beat down upon the dusty town of Redemption, its inhabitants emerging from their hiding places to survey the aftermath of the battle. Jet reined in his horse, his eyes scanning the street. Chub, ever the kid, grinned, his eyes shining with excitement. "Looks like we did it, Jet," he said, his voice husky with pride. Rosie, ever the pragmatist, nodded, her eyes surveying the damage. "We did it," she said, her voice husky with satisfaction. "But there's still work to be done. We've got to make sure those outlaws don't come back." Jet nodded, his eyes never leaving the street. "You're right, Rosie. We've got to make sure they don't come back. And I've got just the man for the job." He nodded at Chub, who grinned, his eyes shining with excitement. "You're in charge, kid," Jet said, his voice low and deadly. "Make sure those outlaws don't come back." Chub nodded, his face set in a determined expression. "I won't let them, Jet," he said, his voice husky with resolve. Rosie, ever the pragmatist, nodded, her eyes surveying the damage. "We'll make sure of it," she said, her voice husky with confidence. And with that, the 3 of them rode off into the sunset, their guns at the ready to face whatever dangers lay ahead. For they were the heroes of redemption, and they would not rest until justice was served.